Is your cat suddenly aggressive? Are they hiding for hours, maybe swatting at you out of nowhere, or maybe meowing all night long like they are lost in their own home? Well, let me tell you something that might change everything. This isn't bad behavior. In many cases, this could be neurological trauma, post-seizure confusion, or even early dementia. So in this four-part series, we are peeling back the curtain of feline neurology, and today we are starting where most people get stuck. Understanding that behavior is communication, especially when the brain is under stress. So this is part one of our four-part series on neurological support for cats. And in part one, which is this video, we explore how trauma, seizures, and cognitive decline affect feline behavior, especially aggression, and why it's not bad cat behavior, but a neurological imbalance. Part two looks at traditional veterinary medicine, how drugs like phenobarbital or gabapentin work, when they are necessary, and what they can't fix. Part three will dive into holistic solutions, so all the natural supplements, acupuncture, red light therapy, diet, and more things that we can do holistically to support our cats with these issues. And then finally, part four brings it all together by showing how a truly integrated, holistic approach supports healing. And I will introduce you to the path that I guide people through inside my programs. I am Paola Zanibelli Davis, the Holistic Cat Specialist and founder of the Holistic Cat Club, and I help you and your cats live extraordinary lives together by unlocking the secrets of natural remedies and positive training, because not having alternative options should not be an option. As a doctor in psychology and a holistic pet health coach certified by the American Association of Veterinary Boards, trained in feline holistic care and nutrition and advanced feline behavior management, my goodness, this is a mouthful, I've had the honor of guiding so many cat families through some of the toughest moments. For example, recovery after trauma, seizure management, or navigating the heartbreak of feline dementia. And through it all, I've seen one thing very clearly, that the brain and the nervous system are so very important. Trauma changes brain chemistry, seizures change neural wiring, and age can distort how a cat experiences the world. So I've worked with cats recovering from serious illnesses, injuries, traumatic events, chronic seizures, and the emotional unraveling that can come with age-related decline. So let's break this down properly with some real clinical depth. Now, let me warn you, I will use some technical terms here because they are necessary to explain this topic, and I would use them in spite of my pronunciation, which might put the letter H where it should not be sometimes, and vice versa. But please bear with me, and I will do my very best. So let's start with PTSD and how it can cause aggression in cats. We often associate trauma with freezing, hiding, or shutdown. But in cats, PTSD can also lead to explosive aggression. And let's talk brain science for a moment. PTSD affects several parts of the brain. The amygdala, which becomes hyperactive, making cats hypervigilant and fearful. The hippocampus, which shrinks basically and misfires, distorting memory and making it harder for your cat to unlearn fear. The prefrontal cortex, which normally regulates fear responses, which can become underactive, meaning that your cats can't calm themselves down, and the anterior cortex, which is involved in impulse control, which can also shrink, meaning that your cats are more prone to react. Several neurotransmitters become also dysregulated, which wreaks havoc on the nervous system. So the result is a cat who lashes out from perceived threats, and even if nothing obvious has actually changed. So common triggers can be a hand that is moving too fast, or a new sound or a smell that is present in the house all of a sudden, or maybe sudden proximity to a person that they don't fully trust. So, and this can be you, of course, because we are talking about perceived threats, not the actual threats. So these cats aren't mean, so they are neurologically overwhelmed, and in dysregulated neurochemistry, which involves high or low cortisol, high norepinephrine, unstable serotonin, and GABA, you have the perfect storm for unpredictable aggression, and this is how this happens. So sometimes PTSD can cause chronic aggression in cats, and this is like a lasting phenomenon, and this is due to lasting changes in the brain function and in the chemistry of the brain. Usually this leads to a heightened state of arousal and a dysregulated stress response. We mentioned that the amygdala is the brain's fear center responsible for detecting threats and triggering responses. So in PTSD, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, as we said before, leading to some sort of exaggerated response to perceived threats. So even those that are not actually dangerous, they are perceived as dangerous. So this hypersensitivity can contribute to chronic aggression, especially when cats are faced with triggers that remind them of the initial original trauma. We also mentioned that the hippocampus is involved in memory and distinguishing between safe and threatening environments. So trauma and PTSD can lead to a smaller hippocampus, and this reduction can impact memory formation and the ability for cats to differentiate between a past threat and the present safe environment. And this leads to a persistent state of hypervigilance and a lack of appropriate extinction of the fear. The prefrontal cortex, as we said before, helps regulate emotions and inhibit impulsive behaviors. In PTSD, the prefrontal cortex becomes underactive, impairing its ability to control the amygdala's fear responses. And now this, of course, can make it difficult for the cat to regulate their emotional responses, and this increases the likelihood of aggressive outbursts. Lastly, we mentioned dysregulated neurotransmitters. So PTSD can lead to imbalances in neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. Serotonin plays a role in mood and emotional regulation, like you probably heard before, and so low serotonin levels can contribute to anxiety, depression, and heightened aggression. Norepinephrine is involved in the fight or flight response, so increased levels of norepinephrine can lead to hyperarousal, heightened startle responses, and also a certain level of increased vigilance, making your cat more reactive and obviously prone to aggression. Now, we need to mention one more thing. Forgive the complicated medical jargon here, but the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which thankfully is called HPA axis for short. This is the body's central stress response system, and in PTSD, the HPA axis can become dysregulated as well, leading to abnormal cortisol levels and a prolonged stress response, and this can obviously result in chronic physiological and psychological effects, including increased anxiety and aggression. PTSD works exactly the same in cats as it does in humans, and we all know how impairing it can be to suffer from this condition, which is why we need to use a lot of empathy towards cats who have been through trauma. These cats are basically in persistent survival mode, and so we need to understand them first of all. So the brain's alarm system in a cat with PTSD remains in a state of heightened arousal all the time, constantly on the lookout for threats. So this means that it makes them easily startled and also more likely to react defensively even to normal things that, to us look normal, because they view them as potential dangers instead. So because the hippocampus, which also we have talked about before, is impaired and the amygdala overreactive, it becomes challenging for the cat to differentiate between past traumatic experiences and the present safe environment, as we mentioned. And this generalization of fear can lead to aggression in a really wide range of situations. So on the receiving end, you end up experiencing a very unpredictable and aggressive cat, and you don't know how to approach this cat. So in essence, PTSD in cats can lead to chronic aggression by altering the brain structure and chemistry, disrupting the normal regulation of fear and stress responses, as we have just seen from what we have discussed before. And so when a traumatized cat swats at you, they are not actually being rude or mean. They are literally stuck in survival mode, which is definitely not a pleasant way to live. Now, let's talk about seizures and post-ictal aggression. This is a frequently misunderstood phenomenon. So after a seizure, a cat enters usually a temporary recovery state called the post-ictal phase. It's like their brain is on reboot, so it's rebooting like your computer when you are installing an update. And during this time, they can experience disorientation and confusion, and sometimes temporary blindness. They can experience hypersensitivity to touch, and also some memory glitches. So this can last for minutes, and sometimes it lasts for hours. And during this window of time, even a normally affectionate cat can hiss or growl or even bite. So the reason why this happens is because their sensory processing is completely distorted, and they don't recognize you, and they are in pain, or maybe they are unfortunately feeling threatened by your very presence, which is very sad also for you, obviously, because on the receiving end, you suddenly don't recognize your cat anymore. Neurologically, we are talking about amygdala hyperexcitability, hippocampal dysfunction, and frontal lobe disruption, and also a phenomenon called kindling, where repeated seizures lower the threshold for future seizures, and aggression sets in. So sometimes this aggression becomes chronic, like we saw for PTSD. So if seizures frequency increases, or if there is an underlying structural damage like tumors or inflammation and so on. So what can you do? You should definitely give them space after the seizures, and you should avoid touching or restraining your cats, and also monitor for frequency and triggers, and definitely work with your vet to assess the need for medication. And of course, work with your holistic practitioner to do all those beautiful supportive things that can really make a huge difference in your cat's recovery from now on. So finally, let's touch on feline cognitive dysfunction, which is another issue that can cause this chronic aggression in cats. This isn't just about forgetting where the litter box is, because as cats age, their brain physically changes, and those changes can result in frustration-based or fear-based aggression. Again, so often is geared towards you, which is very upsetting usually for the cat parent. And so if you think about it, your senior cat is suddenly forgetting who you are. The hallway, for example, suddenly feels very unfamiliar, or they are startled by normal sounds because their hearing is a little bit distorted. Their vision might have declined, so they don't see very well, and their joints hurt usually, and they know they can't retreat easily, so they get into this state of fear and reactivity because of these physical changes. So when you approach them with love and they snap, you feel very betrayed, but what's really happening is that they don't know what's going on, and their brain is firing panic signals all over the place. So aggression in dementia cats can stem from confusion and spatial disorientation, or maybe sleep-wake reversal. So these cats tend to be active at night and irritable during the day. And I know that you think that a lot of normal cats are active at night, and maybe they are sleepy during the day. But in this case, they are active at night in a way that is quite disturbing. Like maybe they are howling around the place, and they are distressed, and they show their distress by howling, meowing, or scratching at the door, and etc., etc. So behaviors that you usually didn't see when they were younger. And also during the day, they become irritable. Obviously, they've been awake all night, feeling disoriented. So this is the consequence that comes from these issues. And then forgetfulness is another reason why aggression in dementia cats can arise, and because they no longer recognize safe versus unsafe. So that's another issue. And also sensory decline, because they simply misinterpret movement as a threat, because they can't see, they can hear very well. So you can add to this the general neurological deterioration, and all of a sudden you have a cat who needs routine, environmental safety, and neurological nourishment, which is very important. We'll talk about that later on. So please do not punish your cat at this point. And I know you don't punish your cat if you are here on this channel, of course. I am just saying that for the others out there. But yes, punishment is the last thing that a cat with this condition needs. And we actually need to gear up our understanding in these cases and use our empathy in the best possible way. So sometimes these things combine. So many people miss that cats often don't have just one of these conditions. They can actually have all three. So a 13-year-old cat, for example, might be a rescue with trauma, and then might have mild seizures that you have not spotted yet, and also might be entering early dementia. So likely also arthritis is also part of the picture, and pain is never a pleasant thing for anyone. So there might be a bit of crankiness as well due to that. And this creates a compound neurological load. So when the load gets too heavy, it shows up as aggression, avoidance, panic, or even obsessive behavior. So this is why it's so important to look below the behavior, because only when we do that, then we can start to support healing at the level of the brain and the nervous system. So in part 2, we will explore what traditional veterinary medicine has to offer for these neurological challenges, from anticonvulsants like phenobarbital or anxiety meds like fluoxetine, and how they can help or hinder your cat's healing. But for now, I want to make sure that you don't leave without grabbing your guide, 5 Steps to Longevity, which will give you strong foundations to ensure you keep your kitty thriving for as long as possible. Plus, all my details are in there, and if you need more help on this particular topic, all you have to do is just get in touch and ask. So thank you for being the kind of cat parent who doesn't settle for surface level answers, and I will see you in part 2. And until then, love your cats as much as you can.